Hey, if you like this content, please like and subscribe. Give a thumbs up. Hit the bell icon. All right, we're going to talk about the Way of the Hunter, the 270 Winchester, or the 2.77 diameter, as it actually is. It's basically a 7mm. They just called it a 270. You can Google all that if you care about that. So we're going to kind of use the in-game data and look at what they're doing, what I think they've done right, what they've done wrong, and how I think they really should fix it. To get started, we're going to look at the encyclopedia. So the external ballistics. So this is what they say they're using in game. So if you're interested in what happens with the bullet once it's been fired, you're in the right place. External ballistics describe the time between the bullet leaving the firearm barrel and when reaching its target. We consider variables in our simulation of external ballistics, which you may know from real life. Projectile drag, expressed as CD or BC. Okay, well, that's kind of wrong anyways. So CD is drag coefficient. BC is ballistic coefficient. To get your BC, you use CD. So they're not the same thing. But projectile drag, so the higher the BC, the less drag it has. So it's going to basically lose less energy and cut the wind better up to a certain point. So when you fire a bullet that's got a high BC, the faster it's going, the lower the BC is going to go. But as it starts to slow down, the BC is going to get a little bit higher. And the drag coefficient is basically based off the shape of the bullet. It's how much drag's going across it and how much it slowed it down. But that's how they get the BC, is the drag coefficient, the sectional density. The BC is not the same as CD, so they're not expressed that way. Atmospheric conditions, temperature, humidity, and altitude totally affect it. Velocity, that's what you're going to get based off your bullet weight and how fast you're pushing, and that's where you're going to get your energy. Wind definitely affects it. Projectile spin, they don't have rifles that have like spin rate, so I don't even know why they put that in there. It does have projectile spin, but why they do it, I don't know. Projectile weight, to name a few. All right, so they're just naming a few. Projectile drag, the bullet's air resistance and how it changes relative to the speed of sound. Where the speed of sound is affected by atmosphere. I can't even talk. Where the speed of sound is affected by atmospheric conditions. When you're talking about CD, that's where you're talking about the drag. And again, CD is where you get your BC. So a G1 bullet has a very high drag and is going to slow down, and the BC is going to be really low. So like a G7 bullet, your BC is going to be, higher, which is going to be less resistant. So it's going to be less air resistant and it's going to fly faster and better. But those are also affected by, the atmospheric conditions. And when a bullet goes from supersonic to transonic, your bullet's really good at crap. Depending, your G7 bullets really go to crap. Your G1 bullets may not. There's a lot to consider there. We're not even going to really talk about that. I don't even know. I'm kind of rambling about it now. So atmospheric conditions, air density, which is caused by humidity, temperature, the denser the air, the slower the projectile. Yeah, so it's going to slow it down. So whether they're doing this, I don't know. I haven't really looked at I haven't gone to different places and done the data yet. I kind of want to, because it is starting to intrigue me, the way they're doing things. Velocity, directional speed, that's how fast the bullet's traveling. Wind deflection, what the wind's doing to the projectile. Projectile spin affects the stability of the bullet, but also causes spin drift. I don't know if they're doing spin drift, to tell you the truth. The 100 cents dot is supposed to show where the bullet might hit, but it's pretty freaking accurate. The 100 cents dot, dude, I ain't had a bullet yet leave where the crosshairs are. If anybody else has had it, let me know, because mine pretty much spot on, right in the center. Projectile weight and velocity of the bullet influence projectile's drag. The heavier the bullet, the less it's influenced by air resistance. Not true. All right, so weight and velocity of the bullet influence projectile's drag. No, shape of the bullets is more the drag, and that's where we're going to get into the sectional density. A higher weight bullet with a better BC might have less drag. It's going to go further and maintain its energy longer than the same weight bullet with a G1, like a flat face, like the sledgehammer in the game. That's going to basically, the weight is not making a difference on the drag. The bullet shape is making more difference on the drag. The weight will let it travel and have more energy, but that's also based on the speed, how fast it slows down. That's why a bullet has a better shape with a higher BC than a bullet with a lower BC is going to go. It's going to create more drag. It's going to slow down the velocity and therefore have less energy, even though they might be the same weight. So that's kind of not true. A heavier bullet is better if it has, say, the same shape, but it's not based on that. So the heavier the bullet, the less it's influenced by air resistance. Not true. Basically, your sectional distance density. I mean, it's a thinner bullet traveling faster is going to have less air resistance. You got to think of a bullet as a sail. The bigger the bullet, the more resistance it's going to be. And just the bigger the bullet doesn't mean the weight. It means the bigger the bullet. So if I have a 223 might be less influenced by the air than a say a 450 because it's bigger. You might have the 223 being lighter is more influenced by the air than the heavier bullet. So yes, they're kind of right, but they're also wrong. I mean, there's a lot of parameters that are in there that's going to make that difference. Coriolis effect, you got to be kidding me. So that doesn't even really affect. I mean, it's like a minute of angle at 1,000 yards, and I'm not talking about like a minute of angle at 1,000 yards being 10 inches. I'm talking about a minute of angle at 1,000 yards being like 1 inch for the Coriolis effect. So you can't even shoot that far in this game. I mean, like 1,500 yards maybe. So why they wouldn't have that, I have no idea. But I did look into the files, and I don't see anywhere that they add for that. So I kind of think they're, I'm going to scream BS on that one. Kinetic energy, the energy of the bullet created by its mass and velocity, calculated as 1/2 the mass, times velocity squared. So velocity of the bullet, the mass of the bullet, and the muzzle energy is the kinetic energy at the muzzle. That's where we get the foot-pounds of energy or the joules. So muzzle energy decreases over time as well as the distance of as the bullet drops, which is caused by air resistance. The higher the BC of the bullet, the less air resistant. But if I have a completely flat-faced bullet that's 270 grain, 308, and I have an extremely high BC, ELDX 308 bullet at the same weight, they're going to drop. Gravity's a constant. They're going to drop the same. But what's going to be the difference is if I can push them faster or push them at the same speeds, so I get the same amount of powder and they're pushing at the same muzzle velocity, leaving the barrel, the flat face bullet is going to lose velocity faster and it's going to slow down. So it's going to have a higher drop rate, not because gravity is the bullet's dropping faster. It's because it's slowing faster. So it's dropping at the same rate, but it's dropping faster than the other one because the other bullet's cutting the air better and keep maintaining its velocity. So I don't know if that makes sense for you, but that's the way it works. The second part of this is optimal hit energy. Is the energy interval where there's no overpenetration or underpenetration, so the bullet has the best effect on the animal's organs for the most effective kill. Problem is with this game is overpenetration or underpenetration doesn't make a difference because the way that they disperse the energy when it gets hit, it makes no difference. A perfect kill shot is right lung, left lung, and the bullet literally touches the outside, the skin on the opposite side. If it exits, then it's wasting energy. If it stops before then and it can disperse all the energy, that's great. But again, that's where you're talking about like a fast traveling bullet that literally hits, explodes, all of its energy is dispersed into one spot. You may not get penetration or, into organs. It may just all disperse into skin and meat. Or, if you can effectively get it all in the one lung, that's great. But the problem is with animals is, people can live one lung, but you can't live without two lungs. So if you can put a bunch of energy in one lung and a bunch of energy in the second lung, it's going to die faster. But the problem is with this game is they put all the energy into one organ. So you've got to kill that organ with all that energy or it doesn't die. So if you do a bunch of, damage in one lung and a bunch of damage in the other, unless you do the damage that they say you got to do, it's not going to make a difference. Terminal ballistics. Terminal ballistics is the concern with behavior and effects of a projectile when it hits the transfer of the energy to a target. So bullet design, as well as velocity of impact. Largely determine the effectiveness of penetration. We simulate direct damage and cavity damage. Direct damage is what, pretty much the bullet going through flesh. And the cavitation damage is the bullet hitting and exploding and going out. So here's the problem that I have with that one also. Bullet design, they might have bullet design for you know, the shape of the bullet, the aerodynamics, that kind of thing, but they're not doing it for the bullet design. And when I say bullet design, say a bonded or a lead cup and core or a monolithic, you know, that's the kind of stuff that they're not doing in the game. So we're going to talk about BC, not CD, totally different. So we will talk about CD. Let's look at these. And sorry, this is not scripted, so I'm kind of rambling. I'm putting the things on here that I want to talk about, but I'm just talking about it. I don't have a script or anything like that. So the bullet on the left is a G1 bullet. A bullet on the right is a G7 bullet. Boat tail. The other one's flat based. So the bullet on the left, the drag coefficient is much higher than the bullet on the right. It's got more drag. It's just streamlined. So what has more drag? A VW bus or a freaking F1 car? You know, that's drag coefficient. So ballistic coefficient is how the bullet's traveling through the air and maintaining that energy. And that's based off the drag coefficient. So you can have a Volkswagen Beetle van in an F1 car, and they got completely different drag coefficients, or they're both the same weight and say the same width, but one's going to have a higher BC, and that means, like, you know, if I get them both to 100 miles an hour and I let go of the gas, because of the drag coefficient, one's going to travel further and faster than the other one. So that's what your BC is. So the one on the left is a G1, the one on the right is a G7. I just want to show, we're going to talk about that and where the game screws up on this and where I think they went wrong and where I think they went right. And that's going to be based off of these bullet designs. And you've got different G models, you got G5, G, but this is what basically they use. The G1 was the first, and if you look at, like, say, you go to Hornady and Remington's website, and you look at the ballistic coefficient of the bullets that they use in this game, they're the G1 model. That's the G1 model. So that's the G1 BC. And the reason they did that is because the G1 BC is going to be higher, which is bad, but it makes it look marketing wise better, because the G7 is actually lower, but the higher BC, the better. I don't know if that's making sense, but say a G1 bullet has a 500 BC, a G7 bullet may have a 200 BC, but 300 BC in a G7 is better than a 200 BC. So they're using the higher one to say, oh, the BC is higher. This is a better bullet, but with the G1, but not the G7 BC ratings or BC number. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you're just going to have to Google. But if you do know what I'm talking about, you're going to understand that the website's using, you know, higher numbers for marketing. All right. So this is an in-screen game shot for the 270 trophy bonded tip. This is a real screenshot of a trophy bonded tip. All right. So this is the in-game data, Hornady Ballistics calculator, and after the patch. So the in-game data was before the patch. The patch is after they did the patch. So basically, the numbers on the bottom, the 1 through 6, that's actually 0 through 5. That's so 0 through 500 yards. The one on the left is just basically your energy and velocity. So it's the number that they're reaching. So you have your velocity is the blue line, and your energy in foot pounds is your orange line. So the in-game data is what I took at, you know, from 0 to 500 yards. I had a target, put it on there to the yardage, the best I can get, you know, close enough to it. And that's what it was. Hornady Ballistics calculator is I took the BC of the bullet, and I don't know what they're using for atmospheric conditions, but I just put in some basics, and that's what I got. And you can see it's pretty damn close. And after the patch, not that big of a change. So this is for a G7 bullet in a ballistic calculator. So pretty freaking good, right? I mean, that's I can't see where you can get any different than that. So this is a Barnes TSX in game, and this is a Barnes TSX actual screenshot. Pretty close, pretty good. So this is the Barnes TSX in-game data. Oh, I messed these up, but after the patch and the Hornady Ballistics calculator. So if you look at it using the G7 model, I put in the ballistics for the Hornady calculator, using the basics, just the BC and the ranges, and the in game and the patch. You can see there's slightly difference, not a whole lot. And if you look at the ballistics calculator, again, it's pretty freaking close. I mean, just under 2,000 at 500 yards, and the patch is a little above 2,000, and the in game before the patch was just slightly above the Hornady ballistics calculator. So again, great job. I mean, they're pretty spot on. They're doing a great job with the ballistics. All right. So here's the 270 core lock soft point in game, and here's the 270 core lock soft point real life bullet. So here's where they start to get it wrong. So you see the in-game data, Hornady ballistics calculator on the patch. That's the G7. All right. So the G7 profile, pretty much just like everything else, spot on. All right. So if you remember the image before, and I'll throw it up on the screen just a second. One on the left, G1, one on the right, G7. Left, G1, right, G7. Completely different bullets. Now back to the data. We saw that bullet design. That is definitely a G1. So the bottom graphs, the Remington data in the G1, that's the Remington data from the website using the G1. The G1 on the bottom right is the actual G1 data in a ballistic calculator. So it's the Hornady ballistic calculator. So if you see the data on the bottom is correct with the G1. The data on the top after the patch and in game is using the G7 design. That bullet should not be using the G7. It should be using the G1. So boat tail for the Barnes TSX and the boat tail for the trophy bonded tip, spot on. They're both G7 bullets. They're boat tails, low drag. This one being a G1 bullet should be using the G1 profile. And if you look at the Remington data and the G1 profile, this is what it should look like as far as energy, not what's on the top. And if you look at it, the G1 data and the Remington's are way worse. I mean, at 500 yards, it's just a little over 500 foot-pounds. And if you look at the G1 model on the data, is just under 1,000. But if you look at the patch after the patch, or even the end game at 500 yards, the foot-pounds is basically almost, I mean, just under 2,000. So the Hornady ballistics calculator has got it at 1,500. So here's where they're messing up. All right, you're using the same calculations, and they're using a ballistics calculator in the game, but they have a form factor, but they're not using the correct form factor. And this is where I think part of the issue is coming in. So this is the in-game UE dump files. So they're using the projectile type. So they got a projectile. It's got a projectile ID. Projectile type, projectile class, projectile caliber, projectile weight, projectile diameter, projectile length, projectile speed, velocity spread minimum, velocity spread max, use form factor, the BC, form factor, curve type, and then they're using an enum, curve type, minimum energy, projectile count. That's probably for, the ammo. I mean, how much it holds. Projectile spread, how big your dot's going to be, minimum penetration, maximum penetration. That's going to come from sectional density, grazing angle component. I'm assuming that's where it goes in, what angle, base damage, bleeding coefficient, probably for, how much damage it does. Never penetrate, probably, if it hits something, it's never going to penetrate that, like a wall, a tree. Penetration normalization, grazing, penetration, entry, angle spread, and scale cavity. And the scale cavity is going to be for your cavitation, for your cavitation damage. So if we go up to the top, you're going to have a projectile ID that's going to say this is this projectile. Projectile type is going to be, it's probably rifle, bow, shotgun. Projectile class, again, that's probably rifle, shotgun, bow. Caliber, it's going to be the caliber because they need that for sectional density. They need it for all kinds of different things. Projectile weight, you're going to need that for velocity, sectional density. projectile diameter. That's coming from the caliber. But they also probably calculate it. You got the caliber, and then the diameter. So 6 millimeter is not a caliber. So 6.5 millimeters not a caliber. 7 millimeters not a caliber. So you gotta do that. So I'm assuming that's what they're doing there. Projectile length is going to play into your BC and your drag coefficient. Projectile speed, like I said, we went over that, the spread, everything. So that's for this portion. And this is coming from the UE dump file. This is in game. So the second part is going to be cavity shapes. That's going to be the cavity that the bullet, gives you. The bullet cam is just basically taking this shape and creating it based on how far the bullet goes and what it hits. Cavity energy percentage, material response map. The material response map and a map in UE is basically, it's just telling you like when it hits bone, when it hits flesh, when it hits this is what it does. SD, sectional density. Frontal CSA, that's your cross section. Side CSAs, your cross section. So how wide it is on the side, how flat it is in the front. Your CD is your drag coefficient. And your CF is form factor of the bullet. So form factor is going to be where it comes into the BC. So the G7 is basically you're using a flat bullet that's there. And let me go ahead and show you an example of that. So this is from Berger's website. So basically the 1.0 is your G7. Any bullet after that, that's basically your form factor that you're using to get your ballistic coefficient based on, that form factor. So if you're using the G7, you're just basically basing that bullet off of this one G7 bullet. But the closer your bullet is shaped to that is what you're going to use for that form factor. So here's the bullets basically compared after the patch. So you got your trophy bonded tip is out to 500 yards going to have your most energy and velocity. Your Barnes TSX is going to have the second most out to 500 yards. And your 270 100 grain core lock soft point is going to be less. It's going to be just below 2000. Your Barnes TSX is going to be above 2000, and your trophy bonded tip is going to be a little bit above 2000. So there's basically how those play out now after the patch. Now here's how they actually should look using the G7 and G1 model. So the Barnes TSX is going to lose a lot more energy. So using a different form factor than the trophy bonded tip, because it's a better bullet. So going back to that, when I showed you that Berger, how they do it. So your energy at 500 yards should be a lot more for the trophy bonded tip. It should dramatically drop for the 100 grain soft point, and it should drop way more than the trophy bonded tip, but still be above the core locked soft point for the Barnes TSX. And here's where we're going to start talking about sectional density. All right, so here's a chart that I created for Excel for the sectional density. Sectional density is basically your bullet weight and diameter and shows penetration. What the bullet is capable of penetrating. So your higher sectional density, the better the bullet's going to penetrate. So the higher the sectional density, the more you want the thing. So if you look at it, I've got like marked on here like varmint is to 0.180. Small game 0.181 to 230. Small game is basically deer, goats, but it's technically medium game. I just kind of named it this way. It's if you look at a lot of people when they talk about sectional density, they're going to say like for medium game, for deer and goats, you're going to need at least the 250. You might need a 230. Shot placement is a lot of stuff, but I'm going based off of what I've seen in the game. Medium game I've got for elk, moose, black bear. It's going to be a 231 to a 280. And large game, in dangerous games, 281 to 300. That's your large bear, Cape buffalo. That being said, you can kill a tier 6 blue wildebeest with a. Let's go look at the 270 real quick. So here's the chart zoomed in. So the 270 core lock, literally small game. It's a 186. I mean, it's just short of being for varmint. And if you look at the box, I can't remember what the box has got on it, but I know the 243 I think does. But disregard that. And then you look at the 270 Barnes TSX and the trophy bonded tip. They're both at a 242 sectional density. and that's for elk, moose, large black bear. I mean, it's medium, or I mean, black bear is medium game, and small game against deer, goats. I got it labeled kind of jacked up, but it's kind of the way I learned things. So the 270 core lock can kill a tier 6 blue wildebeest at 500 yards without a problem, even hitting bone. And I'll show some videos. Not a problem. Will it kill a buffalo at 500 yards? No. Will the 270 Barnes TSX kill a water buffalo? I mean, kill a Cape buffalo at 500 yards? Maybe, if the shot placement's right. Will the trophy bonded tip? Maybe, if the shot placement's right. Here's where the problem comes with sectional density. A lot of people take sectional density for golden. And if you look at my last video, I'll leave the link below. The last video is, or not the last video, but the one I did on the real life bullets compared to in-game bullets. The Barnes TSX shoots through ballistics gel, through bone, through everything. And the reason being is monolithic bullets don't lose mass. They rarely ever lose mass. Maybe you might break off a pedal, but it usually doesn't happen. And the bullets are all about mass, because what is ballistic? I mean, what is kinetic energy? It's mass and velocity. So if you're not losing mass and you're maintaining the velocity, then you're going to have more energy, and that more energy is going to push you through. So those, monolithic bullets, solid copper bullets are basically pushing through it because they're not losing the mass. When you have like a trophy bonded tip, or even worse, the core locked, which is basically, not even bonded, it's just lead inside a copper core. When it hits and mushrooms out, you're sometimes losing a lot of that mass because it's spreading out, it's dropping lead, and you may have a 165 grain bullet, or say this one, 100 grain bullet, by the time it hits, and when you dig it out of the animal, it may be 65 grains. Whereas that 130 grain Barnes TSX, being solid copper, is maybe going to be 128 if it lost something. Where the trophy bonded tip is still going to be maybe 110, 120. So it's not penetrating as far. But where they excel is the trophy, like say the trophy bonded tip, is your ballistic coefficient, where the bullet's going to travel further and maintain its energy further and its velocity further. So you get more downrange ballistics. It's going to be better ballistics down, further downrange. Where the Barnes TSX, even though it's a G7 bullet, because of the design, because of the weight difference and the size difference, because being lighter in a same size, a bigger bullet, because it doesn't have the mass of lead, being copper, you're going to lose a lot more energy as it gets further down range. And you have to have a minimum velocity for that bullet in energy for that bullet to even expand. Whereas the 270 core lock is actually getting pushed out of the barrel faster because it's smaller. You can add more power. It's going faster. It's going to have more energy leaving the barrel, but it's going to lose energy faster because it's not as aerodynamic and it doesn't have the mass. And that's where you're getting the sectional density. And they are using sectional density, but I don't think they're adding all this stuff together in the right way. All right, so here's a blue wildebeest hit with 3069 joules at 500.8 yards with the trophy bonded tip. Hitting bone, hitting the rib, going through the left lung, through the right lung, or through the right lung and the left lung, and touching bone. Here's a Barnes TSX hitting at 2970 joules at 500.7 yards, literally 0.1 yard less. And this is the damage hitting the bone and how far it goes. And here's the core lock soft point hitting at 2454 joules at 500.7 yards. So they're all within 0.1 yard or the same. And less penetration. But I think what's happening here, again, is they're using sectional density. They're not really using the bullet core, and they're using the wrong ballistics. So this shouldn't have penetrated this far, hitting the bone into this animal. And it wouldn't have if they would have used the G1 model. So that's my whole point. So here's the end of my rant. You can use pretty much whatever gun makes the job happen. You can use this chart right here and you'll get a little better results without having to chase the animal down and not having to worry about the place shotment as much. they're using a lot of ballistic calculations. They're using all the right stuff, sectional density, but they're not using what the bullet's made of, and how the bullet's manufactured. And I realize that'd be a lot of programming, but don't say you're realistic in doing this and doing it and then trying to sell off of oh my god, we're selling this game based on these ballistics and you're going to have different types of ammo that perform differently when they really don't perform that much differently. And you could make it where it does. Literally, I mean, use the right ballistics because as you can see in game, the for the 270, a popular rifle from what I can understand people use on in Discord, 270, everybody loves it. And you look at it and the different types of bullets, that 270 core locks off point should not be performing the way it does. It should be performing less. And if you look at the ballistics with just throwing in random, like I said, they're using, I don't know what the altitude, the humidity, and the temperature is on the Africa map, but I just threw in a altitude, temperature, and humidity, and it pretty close to what it is on a Hornady ballistic calculator. I even ran it through the Burger ballistics calculator and one other one, I can't remember what it was, and they all pretty much spot on. And you can tell that they're using the G7 profile, and the other bullets are using the G7 profile, but they're G7 bullets. So if you're gonna use a ballistics calculator, use the right one. And you can model penetration based on what the bullet's going to do. And if if you're going to have copper bullets in there, do a copper bullet. Have it, drop velocity, have it drop energy, and have it maintain sectional density. If you're going to use sectional density, I mean, if you're going to use it, use it. If you're just going to make shit up, just make shit up, but don't tout on this is how it is. And it's, I don't know. I know I'm rambling. I know I'm freaking beating a dead horse, but it's just kind of irritates me a little bit. And because the fact is, Cape Buffalo, you need 4,000 pounds or 4,000 foot-pounds of energy. It says minimum velocity to or minimum energy joules to kill it, and you can literally kill it with a 223 with a 270 core lock soft point. I mean, you need to make that thing where you've got to at least kill it with if you're going to make a great shot placement, it's got to be something that's within that red zone, which is 6.5 Creedmoor fusion rifle. I mean, look at it. It's the 6.5 fusion is a .287. I mean, that's a heavy hitting round. It's got a lot of penetration, but the problem is it's a fast moving round, and it's probably going to displace a lot of that energy in the first portion, depending on what it hits. It's not made for large game that's thick skinned and big boned. It's made for penetrating at long distance, smaller, game. But again, enough of my rambling. This video is going on too long. So, all right. Well, I appreciate it. If you got any comments, if you want me to do more rifles, look up the data. Let me know, because I'm not going to do this if nobody's watching, nobody cares. But I will do every one of them. So wouldn't be this long. I won't have to explain everything now. So, but just let me know. All right. Thanks. Bye. Hey, if you like this content, please like and subscribe. Give a thumbs up. Hit the bell icon.